Dzień dobry. Dorota Leśniak-Rychlak, Instytut Architektury. W imieniu Instytutu Architektury i Instytutu Goethego w Krakowie jest mi bardzo miło rozpocząć dzisiejsze spotkanie, które dosłownie dowiedzieliśmy się godzinę temu, trochę zmieni swój przebieg, chociaż temat zostanie utrzymany. Czyli nadal to będzie Miasto, plotek, lavastories i inne historie. Spotkanie z kolektywem Fem-arc, tylko Lara Stöhlmacher, która przyjechała do Krakowa, ale z powodów osobistych nie jest w stanie dzisiaj przedstawić wykładu. Udało nam się zrobić plan B, mianowicie łączymy się z 2 członkiniami kolektywu Fem-arc w Berlinie. To będzie Océane Vé-Réveillac i Ana Rodriguez Bisbicus. Fem-arc to jest brytyjski kolektyw architektek pracujących nad projektami pod kątem intersekcjonalnym. Od 2018 roku, wtedy założyły kolektyw, krytycznie przyglądają się strukturom władzy w przestrzeni i skrzyżowaniu indywidualnych doświadczeń dyskryminacji ze względu na płeć, rasę, status ekonomiczny, zdolności, queer, religię i inne. I tutaj to jest grupa, która zaczęła się podczas studiów architektury i grupa studentek, które się zorganizowały, 6 konkretnie, sprzeciwiając się temu, w jaki sposób architekci byli zapraszani i jak architektura była prezentowana na studiach na Uniwersytecie Technicznym w Berlinie. Mianowicie właśnie to był zawsze ktoś ex cathedra przemawiający, zazwyczaj oczywiście mężczyzna przemawiający w sali wykładowej i one tutaj stwierdziły, że no ta nieobecność kobiet jest absolutnie uderzająca. Zmieniły miejsce tych spotkań i po prostu zorganizowały zupełnie niezależny program, w którym już nie było tych ścisłych hierarchii, było więcej dyskusji, wymiany i oczywiście kobiet siłą rzeczy wykładowczyń. Później rozwijały swoje działania przez warsztaty, serię podcastów, spacery audio i poprzez te właśnie różnego rodzaju działania kwestionują normy i standardy w dziedzinie architektury oraz propagują strategie przestrzenne, które tworzą niedyskryminujące przestrzenie. I jeszcze oczywiście właśnie wymienię członkinię Fem-arc, Océane Vé-Réveillac, która będzie dzisiaj też mówiła, Amelie Schindler, Insa Streit, Lara Stöhlmacher, Lucía Gauchat Schulte, Aslı Varol i Ana Rodriguez Bisbicus to dzisiejsza druga prelegentka. Natomiast jeszcze, ponieważ one też zostały zaskoczone faktem tego, że będą dzisiaj prezentować, to kupujemy im trochę czasu i chcemy Państwu pokazać 2 filmy krótkie, jeden 3, drugi 8-minutowy, pokazujący właśnie działania kolektywu. A kolega Michał Wiśniewski z Instytutu jest dzisiaj też osobą techniczną.
We understand listening as a critical practice, an active practice that develops and enhances awareness. Listening, understood as a point of departure for relational processes and a point of departure for conversation, for yourself and with others. What can listening to other people's stories do with us? How can we bring a spatial and collective aspect to listening? Can listening be understood as a collective spatial practice? The space in which we live can be seen through different perspectives. Space can be a place of meeting, a place of fear, a place of resistance. Environments are designed, but by and for whom?
This condition seems to be very, very deep, that me as a female body needs some kind of excuse, that I feel the urge to communicate with my environment why I have this or the allowance to actually just hang out here. Squat the place with your presence. Try to avoid to be read as somebody who's waiting.
Rather than rushing through the space, I've begun to see that textures or the smells or the environment, there's things that are really interesting here. They begin to understand that you might be left out from the group because you can't move as fast as everybody else. So it just starts a whole new conversation.
if you argue that you should start from difference rather than add difference, what does that mean in terms of the kinds of teaching that you do, the kinds of activities that you do, the workshops, how it affects how people literally learn the subject? Again, not just you need to know this about disabled people, but how you think about the world and your place and the place of other people in it.
The city's full of traces of history. If you're on a street, keep moving to the next street sign nearby. Maybe there's no street sign, but other signs carrying names. What names do you see? Do you know the stories behind them?
No one understands how hard it is for us to breathe. How hard it is for us to wake up and exist. To be ourselves, when the whole world is telling us not to. From being pushed, shoved, kicked, followed, spat on, physically and mentally harassed.
Take a deep breath. Do you have spaces where you can be yourself freely?
As I walk in the Latinx block, it always feels surreal to be on the street. Taking so much space as a migrant woman of color, together with others, is really empowering. We sing, we scream, we dance, we run. Resistencia, resistencia, resistencia is a practice used by student movements in Latin America during demonstrations. Say the word 4 times, crouching down lower and lower as you say it. By the 3rd time you say it, you're almost on the ground. Then, with all the power of those 4 words, you run.
Umumi tuvalet nasıl kullanılır? İlk olarak kabinden içeri girdiğinizde dikkatli olun. Kapının kulbunu tutmamaya çalışın. Çünkü insanlar tuvaletlerini yaptıktan sonra kabinde ellerini yıkamadan kapının kulbunu açarak dışarı çıkarlar. Çünkü kabinde el yıkayacak bir yer yoktur. Bu yüzden kapıyı küçük bir parça tuvalet kağıdıyla açın ya da kapının kulbunu tuttuktan sonra o elinizi başka bir yere değdirmemeye çalışın. Şimdi tuvaletimizi yapmak istiyoruz. Önce sifonu çekmeliyiz ve bunu yaparken klozet kapağını kapatmalıyız. Böylece etrafa mikrop yayılmasını önlemiş oluruz. Eğer genç isek ve herhangi bir hareket kısıtlılığımız yoksa tuvalete oturmadan çömelerek tuvaletimizi yapabiliriz. Aynı zamanda bacak kaslarımızı da çalıştırmış oluruz. Bu şekilde işerken klozetin üzerine sıçratmamaya özen gösterin. Eğer bu pozisyonda bir süre durup tuvaletimizi yapabiliyorsak, sadece klozetin iç kısmına tuvalet kağıdı koymamız yeterlidir. Klozetin içine koyduğumuz tuvalet kağıdı, çişimizin ve orada bulunan diğer mikropların üstümüze sıçramasını önler. Eğer genç değilseniz ve hareket özgürlüğünüz kısıtlı ise ya da bacaklarınız yarım çömelme pozisyonunda uzun süre durup işeyecek kadar kuvvetli değilse, o zaman klozetin üstünü de temizlemeniz gerekir. Islak mendille silip sonra üzerine tuvalet kağıdı ile döşeyebilirsiniz. İşiniz bittikten sonra kağıtları klozete itip sifonu çekin. Dışarı çıkarken kapı kulbuna dikkat edin.
During first deep lockdown, we went for a trip to a historic city, which is normally very touristic. The city was empty, just few people exploring this UNESCO treasure. It was 10 days until the lockdown should end. Just coffee places had open windows. After cruising the city with my family, we went to the city information to ask if there are public toilets open. I was pregnant, my friend was on her menstruation, and the lady in the information told us the public restroom is going to be open after the lockdown will end. It was impossible to find a hidden spot in the city for us, just for our boyfriends. In the end, we waited until the gas station, but it was approximately 1 hour. I was so pissed off. I read the book Feminist City back then, and my blood was boiling. Like a lot of other issues, bathroom access became visible to me as an urban concern when I had an infant and then a toilet-training toddler in tow. I quickly learned that department stores were our best bet for emergency diaper changes, spots to nurse, and a decent level of cleanliness and provisioning. As spaces built with the comfort of women in mind, department stores, while not always explicitly set up to best serve mothers, were spaces where the bathrooms were likely to be spacious, have lots of stalls, be elevator or escalator accessible, have a chair one could sit in to nurse, offer baby changing stations, be a safe space to leave a stroller outside, and so on. On particularly messy outings, there were also places I could buy a quick change of clothes to replace a poop-splattered onesie. In fact, department stores remain my go-to places to go, whether I have a kid with me or not. Unfortunately, urban department stores are disappearing, and with them, their comfortable and accessible bathrooms.
Die gesamte Welt befindet sich in einer Krise und wir mussten trotzdem morgens um 8 Uhr vor die Tür und durften erst um 18 Uhr wieder in die Einrichtung. Nur noch eine eingeschränkte Anzahl von Frauen durfte in der Unterkunft übernachten, also waren die anderen auf der Straße gelandet. Ich bin manchmal tagelang Bus gefahren, weil alles andere ja geschlossen hatte. Nicht mal zur Toilette konntest du gehen, was sollen schwangere, obdachlose Frauen da machen? Ich musste lernen, aber die Cafés und Bibliotheken hatten geschlossen. Die Träger der obdachlosen Einrichtungen haben das absolut nicht mitgedacht. Und dann die Polizei. Als die Pandemie losging, konnte ich nicht mehr im Park auf der Wiese sitzen, ohne von der Polizei angesprochen zu werden, wieso ich denn nicht zu Hause sei.
J'ai essayé de me mettre à la cup il y a 2 ou 3 ans, je crois. Et c'est vraiment en commençant à l'utiliser que j'ai commencé à être attentive à la manière dont les toilettes étaient organisées dans mon école. Un jour, j'ai vidé ma cup aux toilettes sans remarquer que le lavabo était hors des cabines et j'en ai un peu mis partout. Et je savais qu'il y avait quelqu'un d'autre dans les toilettes d'à côté, donc j'ai dû attendre de l'entendre partir pour sortir des toilettes et pouvoir rincer ma cup et mes mains pleines de sang, en priant pour que personne n'entre et voie le lavabo tout rouge avec mon sang partout. Et après quelques temps, je savais exactement quelle toilette je pouvais utiliser ou pas quand j'avais mes règles et lesquelles j'évitais, alors qu'avant je m'étais jamais vraiment attardée sur la place du lavabo. C'était vraiment pas quelque chose qui était important pour moi. Je sais que certaines de mes amies ont toujours une bouteille d'eau et des lingettes dans leur sac au cas où elles doivent rincer leur cup dans des toilettes où il n'y a pas de lavabo dans la cabine.
Muss man die Klofrau bezahlen? Steht neben dem Waschtisch ein Teller für Münzen, steht es Ihnen frei, ob Sie einen Betrag zwischen 50 Cent und einem Euro zahlen möchten. Ist die Toilette sauber und gepflegt, ist dies zudem eine kleine Anerkennung für den Service. Das gilt auch für die Klofrau. Sie können, müssen aber nicht zahlen. Rechtlich gesehen ist nämlich bei der Benutzung des Klos kein Vertrag zwischen Ihnen und der Klofrau zustande gekommen und somit besteht auch keine Zahlungspflicht. Die Klofrau hat in der Regel einen Reinigungsvertrag nur mit ihrem Auftraggeber abgeschlossen, also beispielsweise dem Diskothekenbesitzer.
Darin ist die Reinigung der Toiletten
beinhaltet. Sie als Gast haben jedoch keinen Vertrag mit dem Auftraggeber und müssen deshalb die Klofrau auch bezahlen.
So, we already presented the movies and it's time for you. Yes, thank you. Let me share the screen.
Welcome to Krakow.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hello from Berlin.
Hello from Berlin.
Wait, share the screen. Here we go. Can you see it in full screen?
Yes, everything's fine.
Super.
Great. Yes, first, many thanks for the invitation. We will try to do our best, and we hope to have a nice exchange with you. So we're 6 persons in the collective. And as you can have already seen with the 2 movies, we're trying to tackle question and engage question in a critical way that are about space and power structure. And so we started our collective in 2019. We all met at the University of Arts in Berlin. So we all studied architecture. And maybe before I talk a bit further, there is one quote that we really like to start with, because I guess it kind of talks in a, like, represents good in a good way the way we work and the way we like think about space. So it's a quote from Katie Lloyd Thomas in her text Lines in Practices, and she's actually looking for alternatives to the classical architectural drawings in the design process, and it's a good starting point. So I'm just going to read it. I sit alone at my drawing board trying to design a building. There are some memories of smells, the echoes between walls, textures in my fingertips, raised voices arguing their case, quiet gestures of resistance, faces lit in anticipation of possibilities. But my pencil can only draw the lines of habit, and can there be another place to begin? So I guess that kind of wrap our whole the way we work. So we started really to think about, as students first, how do we learn about architecture and what kind of reference are we being shown during architecture studies, and why has so little change in the structures of academic profession like architecture especially, and why so long. And we were really keen on to think about how can we bring marginalized voice into space, and especially in architecture. So the first project I will talk about was our really first endeavor. So it was a lecture series called F-Talk. And so basically, to go back, we were just architecture students, and we thought, okay, like I think the next slide will explain a bit the situation. So that's basically the lecture series that was taking place at our university. And so these are the recordings. And as you see, it's only men. And like we were always talking in between the corridors, in between the studio, okay, what we should change this, we should do something. This is like, and then instead of just complaining, we thought, okay, let's just do it. Like, let's just do our own lecture series. So that was kind of sort of our first moment of empowerment, of saying like, okay, this is enough. Like, let's just do something. Let's just make this space of university as such our own, and let's just do something. So what happened is that we applied for some fundings at the university, and we decided to invite 5 women that we found inspiring, but that were not practicing architecture like we had one architect that was really building buildings, but we really wanted to explore the whole scope of what architecture could mean. And so here you can see the lecture that was made with Helga Blocksdorf. So she's an architect doing mostly building in Berlin. And what we also wanted to go away from was this form of like front stage, and you have someone presenting, and then you have like the people just attending and looking. So the whole idea of how do you make the space for presentation was also really important for us.
Excuse me, there is a problem with presentation. We only see the PDF press, but we don't see the presentation. Something switched, I think.
Should I try to share, to go out and
probably close this one?
Sorry, I will try again. Wait.
Yeah.
here. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you for. I could have come carrying on without noticing. Yeah. So just to go back, so you see that we really tried to offer an environment that was maybe nice for kids and where people could accommodate if they want to lie down or if they want to sit, or and kind of try to dispose the space in a way that it's break those barriers of like a front stage. And also a nice things to know about this space is that so we're in a university of arts, and it was the place where, how do you call it, like the act drawing was taking place. So basically like when artists are drawing nudes. So I think like also the idea about like body being in this space and like working with this was interesting to us. Then we also had Liza Fior from Architecture Art, a practice in London. Then this is the talk with Kerstin Holmach. She's an artist based in Berlin, and she's really working with queer theory and performative art. Exactly. And then I'm going to switch to another project. So after this, we're saying, okay, this is actually nice. We did this, but how can we bring this to a larger audience? And we thought, okay, actually it would be really nice to have something recorded of those kind of exchanges. So the idea of podcast became more evident because it's something that you can do and put online and people have access to it. And what was interesting also to us is to say, okay, instead of inviting people to the university, maybe this time we will take our recordings machine and just go visit them, because we really felt that the place where someone is able to work is also really important in the way they are working, and especially for women, having a space of their own might be a good way to know how is this whole infrastructural level working for women to be able to practice architecture or to practice spatially. So we had this list. I will show some pictures. Yeah, so sorry, I forgot that I had this quote, but the master's tool will never dismantle the master's house, from Audre Lorde, was really important to us to say, okay, actually the way, if we want to change architecture, maybe we should try other tools and maybe not work visually, because we always had the feeling, okay, architecture is always something that is really visual, and how can we try to work with sound and interviews and this heart of oral history to bring this back and say, okay, we try another tool to dismantle the master's house. And another point that was actually quite interesting during the podcast making is that we really try to work with binaural recordings. So I don't know if you know this technology, but basically you're recording, you have two recordings that allow to capture the space. So if a train is passing by, you will hear it from there to there. And so we try to really work this whole spatial sound and to bring it into the podcast, because I think we're still architects, so we really like to have this spatial aspect and to have like a sort of depth in everything what we do. It's always really related to space. So for example, here it's in London, we visited the Disordinary Architecture Project. They had an exhibition. It's a group that is working a lot with how do we design the space differently, and they work a lot with people with disability and try to find also new ways of doing architecture, like how do you make a project or explain a project to someone that is blind, this kind of question. And you will see we have actors, like we met them and we worked with them even later. So we like to kind of always have this kind of connection and keep a link with the people we work with. This one was with the agency. They're like a performative theater. So they're basically doing immersive theater. So it means that they also work really spatially. They don't invite the public and then everyone is like in a box and in a really dark area, but they play and you can really work in their space while they're actually acting. So I think it was a really nice meeting with them. And this is Diana Lucas-Drogan. We visited her in her atelier in Berlin. And she's an architect, but she's working a lot with mapping and representation of invisible layer in space. I think, yeah, this is Diana McCarthy. She is a radio activist, and she really tried to work with communities in Berlin and to open a sort of, you will say, like, what is the link between radio and space? But we felt that actually it's a bit like the podcast, like how do you open up a space for marginalized voice? And it's really the work she's been doing, opening like a radio frequency. It's also on internet in order to community to discuss amongst each other and to have this discourse. I'm jumping to the project of the F walks. So basically, it's an audio walk that was made with the people here, Kerstin Ronay, that we've been talking about earlier, Mandala Numbiwa, Zoe Partington and Charles Boyce from the Disordinary Architecture Project, Yapo, and Untitled. And so basically it was, how do you say, we were asked from a gallery to organize a city tour about an emancipatory practice in Berlin. That was right before Corona came, and then they say, okay, we have to, like, it won't happen. We cannot do a city tour because we cannot meet in public space. So we thought, oh, okay, that's such a pity. Let's try to find a way of still do this. And we came up with the audio walk that people would be could download on their phone and go in the city by themselves, because at that time, I don't know, it's different from each country, but in Berlin at that time you were able to go out on your own, but not in a group. So we thought, okay, we will give something that people can have on their phone and go for a walk outside and do. And we started to gather different perspectives on public space. And the idea was really to try to make those feminist spatial practices, I was about to say visible, but actually it's more hearable, despite the physical distance from the time from COVID and where everyone was kind of isolated. And so we went to all these people and we were trying to listen to their stories and how do they work with urban space, how do they feel in this, and what kind of practices they developed in order to make this space their own and to sort of reassess this space that is not always made for everyone. So during the walk, you're basically guided by binaural sound recordings as well as in the podcast. And the listeners can really encounter like a variety of stories. And basically it's not planned as a place, it can be done anywhere. So I really invite you to do it if you want. We will have a link to it later on. Exactly, so it was more collective, collection of stories put together, and I think we've been doing it in different places. So here you can see that was the first time in Berlin. This one was done in Copenhagen during the architecture festival last year. Exactly, and then I will give the floor to Anna.
Hi everyone. Greetings from Berlin. So I will continue talking about our project we did in 2019. So we go back in time a bit. This as a project, we got invited to a summer school, and that was called Making Futures. And we got invited to be there and document the summer school. And something we asked ourselves before entering the summer school was like, how can we actually, we had several questions around this. And for example, and one of them was like, who can actually have time and have the space to think about future? So, and we were thinking this is actually a very privileged position to have the time, the capacity, the space to think about it. And also what we wanted to do is going to the summer school and reflect exactly this question, and also, yeah, reflect the thing that it's also something very like privileged to be able to go to a summer school, visit a summer school. I think, yeah, maybe some of you know that it's like, it's also, yeah, you need the time to go there, you need the money to pay the summer school and so on. So what we started was like a series of conversations with the students and the people there about their privileges, and we used a method. First of all, it was for us pretty hard to get into conversations with people, so we had different tries, and one of them was like we started putting a question every day, and those questions were changing every day, and we're getting more and more specific, and they were taking questions around gender and about exclusion, about safer spaces, about different all those topics. And later on, we were having silent conversations. This is a method we didn't invent. It's like already Gili was using it already. What we did was like adapting it to this place. So the silent conversations were spaces where people could have a silent conversation. So the conversations were held in written form. This is a form of our method that enables people to have a conversation and maybe say stuff they wouldn't say out loud in a space. And what we were doing there, we're discussing the questions we were putting during the day on the board. So people were sharing opinions and their experiences around exclusion, freedom of movement, economic capital, and safety on the street. And after those conversations, we had so we had the silent conversations, and after that we were putting a microphone in the middle of the room and having discussion, like a conversation now out loud about what we were writing actually. And this was more sharing how we felt doing it. And this recordings ended up in an installation at the end of the summer school. So people that were not part of those conversations could be part of it. But of course, some of the recordings were like we changed kind of the recording. So like information that was maybe sensible was like anonymously, so people couldn't because I think it's there we started actually to think about also more like how do we engage with this the stories we get, and because they are about sensible topics, they're all about marginalization and so the idea was like to share this in the installation. And what came after that was a publication that got recently out, and we're very happy about it. It's in this publication we were trying to transcript the sounds that were like, and the stories we were like, the recordings we had from the summer school, and try to translate them into paper. And we were having different, like trying to also not visualize the voices, but also the sounds and background. And we were asking ourselves, how do we actually represent sound? And is this maybe also a form we could use to represent spaces? And could we use this further, like, I don't know, could this be also read as a ground plan and so on? So yes, this is the Making Futures Summer School. And this project is now a project that started 2020. And here we are going back to university. We started a studio series that is a short block seminar held in university at UDK, so at the University of Arts in Berlin, where we all met. So, and then the first studio, we invited again the guests we knew already from the podcast. We invited this Ordinary Architecture Collective to make a workshop with us. And in the second studio, we look into more detail into critical cartography as a method for spatial practice. This is a screenshot from the first studio. So the first studio took place in the middle of the pandemic. And in the studio, we were reflecting about our everyday life, how it changed with the pandemic, and how stuff that was conventionally very known for us, like, and very separated, like public, private, inside, outside, visible, invisible, was shifting, and how, the borders between those were like getting more blurred. So in this seminar, we started doing through different like exercises that were creating different body sensations, or testing how, we did an exercise, for example, walking out with this chair on the arm. So to create just a different body sensation, and how to just like have the feeling, okay, how does it actually feel if you go out, move through space, if you have something different on your body. And what we were reflecting here were questions around how, maybe for us right now with the situation with the pandemic, we had to get creative in terms of how do we meet people again, how can we move through space differently. And those questions maybe are questions that actually many disabled people would already have already, and they were already developing tools to move through our normed space. And so what came out of it were different projects, and you can see them in our studio website. And in the second studio, as I said, we were looking more into critical cartography. This studio, we were able to do hybrid forms, so we were meeting, but also having it in digital. And here we were different. It was more like, having an introduction into what cartography is and how we can use it actually as a tool in architecture. And in this exercise on the right, you see the matrix of domination. So we were using this matrix of domination as a tool as well. And this matrix of domination was presented and was created by a Black US-American sociologist, Patricia Hill Collins, in her book, Black Feminist Thought. And it's, I would say, a diagrammatic representation of how different forms of privilege and marginalizations intersect. You could say it's also kind of a visual representation of how intersectional feminism or intersectionality works. And for us, it's super important also to say that intersectionality is also a tool, an analytical tool developed by Black women and scholars of color to understand their own positioning, to understand that there are different kinds of oppression and different kinds of marginalizations you're in, and you can experience racism, you can experience sexism, and you can experience classism, and they are intersect. So yes, I think it's super important for us to tell this, because it's a really big part of how we work. Also, every time acknowledging the people, the information, like the people we have information from. So here we see a picture of the presentations. At the end, the students were presenting their work. And here you see a work called Back to the Streets that it's showing two mappings. There are two versions of this map and two different people were mapping the same route or like the same day going home and what they experience and what they hear, what they encounter during this day, and how this changed according to how this person is being perceived, how this person is being read as a female body, as a male body. And in this work, Madeleine Burton is mapping the side effects of COVID, the pandemic, and how different symptoms, and this time, and here in this example is how different symptoms kind of symptoms like sorry, I forgot the word. Feelings are connected to different places in public space and in private space. And so you can see all the works in this website. You can visit it, and it's super interesting because, for example, this work was created also actually to share it with other people. So other people could also use this map to map their feelings, how they connected to other places during the pandemic. So, and I would go to our most recent project, and the last project we're also still working on. This is City of Gossips. And I will read the quote from Silvia Federici. In many parts of the world, women have historically been seen as the weavers of memory, those who keep alive the voices of the past and the histories of the communities, who transmit them to the future generations and in so doing, create a collective identity and profound sense of cohesion. So in this new project, we looked more detail into gossip or gossiping, or what's gossip about. And in the original meaning, gossip meant a close friend, and gossips were persons that were having a kind of trusting relationship in which they could share their true thoughts and feelings. So they were like very close people to someone, and in most of the cases actually also like female friends. And in this project, we are interested in the feminist perspective from gossip, looking at gossip not as something actually bad or something malicious or something that is just there for putting someone in a bad situation or something. We're looking at gossip more as a emancipatory tool, or like actually as a feminist, with the potential of sharing information in a vocal way, also something very connected to female bodies in the past. So in this project, we are still working on. The first thing we did was doing an installation in a window installation, because it was also during the pandemic last year. And this installation is in a place called Aquarium that's situated in Kreuzberg, which is a neighborhood that has also changed during the last years because of gentrification, because of high rents. And in this window installation, we were looking at gossip from different perspectives. So we were collecting stories, or gossiping with people. And we have the middle part, we were looking at the media representation of gossip. How does gossip look like? And for this, we were looking at movies and series from different countries, also to see how does it represent in different territories. And in the last part, we were looking more, so Sorry. And the last part, we were looking at the theory. So, and here you can see one of the stories that's in German, but it's about police violence and from the neighborhood and how, so what we were also like observing here is that, the spaces you gossip are spaces that you wouldn't do it every time with every person. So you need kind of a trust to someone. And here are the media representation of gossip. So different and people gossiping to each other. And this was an installation. So the movies were like, this is a photo, but the people were actually moving. And then there was a point where it looked like they were like having a conversation with each other. And one part of the exhibition was also trying to bring theory, the theory of gossip, so the writing of Silvia Federici, but the writing of Donna Haraway in a more simple way to this installation. And to make theories more accessible and to also bring maybe academic language to translate it in a more easier language and also to different languages. So we have also here German, English, and Turkish. So this is something really important for us also to try to use as much languages as we can use. So we can also access to more and more people. And part of this project were different workshops we were having in another place that is also a community space in Neukölln. That's also a neighborhood that has been changing a lot. And we were having different workshops there. And one of them is like, as I showed before, the sketching workshop. And this is like a stitching workshop we did with an artist, with Diana Lucas-Strogan, who we met before during the podcast. So this was nice time to to share actually again the same space but with a different practice. So here Diana Lucas-Strogan was bringing stitching, and she was telling us that stitching historically was always also something that it's very connected to female bodies, and that stitching were spaces or stitch rounds were spaces where most of the time female bodies were like a retreat and have a space to talk about different stuff, and how those spaces were actually super important in the past to create a network and to share information. So yes. And part of this City of Gossips project is the movie you just saw, Lavastories, that is showing, it's a short film we produced for the Architectural Museum in Rome. And here public toilets are being examined, looked at through the lens of mostly female perspectives, experiences, and how those spaces are actually, maybe I would say, the more touchable example of how gender and space are intersect. So because public spaces or public toilets are really like or toilets in general are really spaces where people actually have to decide, for example, which gender to choose, or maybe some of it makes, even if for example public toilets, if you're not able to use it, maybe would make your participation in public life really difficult. So what we were doing here, we're collecting stories about different experiences with public toilets in space. And yes, so I think, I don't know, you just saw the movie, and it's still going on till September 2022 and this year. And so, yes, I would end this presentation with some projects we would have in the future. So we would like to engage more in the future with more local groups, having more long-term projects. We're working on right now self-defense workshop with for female, non-binary, trans, and agender people, planning laboratory to engage also with young girls that are, I think for us, it's maybe a topic that it's not being very discussed about, the accessibility of young people in space and mostly young females in space. So yes, this is something we wanted to share. And yes, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I just see the slide is in German. My apologies.
Yes, I hope we can understand. So yes.
Yeah, thank you for
this. Is the rest. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Because we wanted to have some questions from the audience, but right now it seems that the mics are not working, but probably it will take a minute. I would like to ask if in your experience, were you confronted by this male architectural world also not only during the studies but later on, and what was the reaction to your work? Can you perhaps tell us something about it? And in the meantime, we will arrange the mics. Okay.
I can just explain. I know it's an interesting question, but I think even in the first project, when we're still students at university and we started to do this lecture series, we even had reaction from women saying but why are you doing this? There's no point, there's no problem, I don't get this. So I think it's even interesting because you asked this question from did you have any male reaction, but I can say we had also female reaction. But I don't know, I don't recall any big do you recall anything?
I mean, what I found interesting is that what's happening right now, that it's, I think, because it's a topic that's being more and more discussed, I think the reactions towards it is now I have the feeling it's getting more into actually, I heard of someone that told me about your work, and I think, so I don't know, I would say that in the past it was much more harder. I think it's still, we're still not there to say that it's an easy situation. And I think in my, personally, I would say we also need to shift more the questions, it's not only about cis men, it's also about racism, it is also about classism, ableism. So other forms of discriminations that intersect. So I think regarding this, we're still further away, I would say. But so
yeah, I recall again also because we've been doing the F-works quite a lot, I think, more than what we just shown. But we had a really interesting situation, doing it with architecture students that are maybe not being sensitive to any feminist theory, or even that don't really know about it. And we had really nice feedback. I remember another member of the collective that was doing it told us at some point, hey girls, it was amazing. We had this guy that did the F-works, and he was really astonished that he never realized that maybe public space could be felt differently from a women perspective, that maybe there is places you don't go, that is places you don't feel invited to, or even with the toilet, the lavastories, that maybe sometimes you're in the public space and you really want to go to the washroom and there is no possibility, especially, and probably many of us have experienced this, during COVID time, it was everything was shut off, you had nowhere to go. So it's kind of limiting you somehow in a public space. And I don't know, as women, we don't just sit there and pee. So this is basically closing off from the public space. So I feel that there is an openness to talk about this. And I feel it's really interesting when you start telling the stories, because at first, like, I guess you always have this sort of reaction, like, oh, okay, but well, whatever, we're beyond this, or this is not a topic yet. But then when you, and I think it's all the point of feminist practice to say, okay, I'm telling you a story that I'm living in, or like, this is my experience of space. And then I guess most of the people are open to listen to you and to acknowledge what you're living through. And I guess that's the way we also try to work, by doing podcasts, by doing F-walks. Always try to not tell you, okay, this is how you should think, but like, okay, look, this is what people experience. So maybe it's time to acknowledge it and to work on it. So I think the whole process we try to engage with is mostly to try to take this personal as a message and to make it accessible to everyone. And it's also always in the Making Future project, like we share really intimate stories with people, and how do you make this exclusive space back in the public, and to say, okay, we want to have a political message, and we have to at some point transcend this exclusive space to have a political message we can bring to others. So I think it's, yeah. But most of the time people are really open to talk about it. So probably, I guess it's a change.
Thanks a lot. It seems we may have another problem, but at the moment the mic is working, but so perhaps someone would like to ask a question. Może ktoś, wiem, że jest straszliwie zimno, ale może ktoś ma jednak jakieś pytanie? O, Gata, super.
Hi, so I want to pick your brain about the, let's say, the aspects of the project you mentioned at the end of the presentation. So you were telling that you are now starting to work on public space for girls, like, or not dedicated to girls, but let's say, so the public space that is, I don't think they hear it. So that is like more girl-friendly, let's say. And I started reading about it. Now you hear me? Can you hear?
Now it's much better.
Okay.
We're a bit like, oh, no.
So I started reading about how, for example, girls don't do sports in public spaces because there are no changing rooms. And this is like the biggest, let's say, the biggest problem that preventing us from, you know, practicing basketball, tennis, or anything in public space. And I wanted to ask if you've got any more conclusions about it, like how can the public spaces be more, let's say, friendly for girls, for them to be more comfortable in such a space? Maybe there are some functional tips or a specific program that could be introduced in the space for it to be more inclusive. Yeah.
No, because I think like that's an interesting step you're talking about, because I think that's what we try now to start. I have to say first, like, I think you can really look at the work of MUF Architecture Arts that was invited in the lecture series, because this is exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it like amazingly, trying to develop public space for everyone. And I think you can see that our work is really like a process. Like, we've been starting from when we were students, and now we're like kind of living, we all graduated, and we're now all doing different kind of things, but still the last slide, we were talking about a project we just got funding for, and it's actually about this. It's like we want to work on a specific neighborhood in Berlin, and trying to start to think about young female and non-binary person and their experience in public space. And I guess there is no formula, you know, there's no, I mean, we could have said, okay, let's do something in public space that will invite everyone, and we will make a nice design and try to think about how it could work. But actually we said, no, there is a public space that is already existing in this area. May it be good or not. probably the first thing we should do is like look at it, like what is actually happening now, and try to address the users. So we want to work with those teenagers and ask them, okay, is there any places you feel good actually in public space, and which are those? And like try to reflect with them, why does it feel good? Does it feel good because your parents cannot see you? Does it feel good because you feel like secure? Because I don't know, maybe there is a little wall and no one can see you, or this is a place where people can see you, so you know that if anything that happen, you will be seen. Or is it, can you go in public space? Is maybe like the first question we should ask. And I think the whole idea is to work on that first, and then to say, and maybe enhance, maybe those public spaces, they already exist, or they have features that are interesting to look into and to learn from, and then to enhance them. And I think it's a decisive, like really important question you're asking. And I think there is no one answer. I guess it depends which kind of space you're going into. And I guess space is really, and especially public space, is never a blank page. There is already power structures. There is already people inhabiting them, taking space or not taking space, staying at home, no going out during the days, like in the evening. So I guess if we have to do this step, I feel that this work has to be done before coming and imposing a sort of design onto a place. I don't know, maybe I was talking too much. Thank you. I hope it gives a bit of discussion or thoughts.
Thank you very much. I think, okay. Can you hear the mic now? Can you hear us?
We hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I just wanted to ask if there is any meaningful way that we as the consumers of the ideals that of intersectional feminism can do besides bringing awareness to the issue. Is there any meaningful way we can engage with the content, or maybe with our government or with local governments?
Sorry, can you maybe, we didn't hear, we couldn't understand good the question, but just because of the sound, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me better right now.
Yes, really good now.
Okay, great. Because I was asking, what do we as consumers of intersectional feminism can do to, besides bringing awareness to the issue? Is there any meaningful ways that we can engage with this content that you're producing with our local governments, with the government itself, or with our friends and family?
I think, thank you for the question. I think it's, first of all, this work we were doing we were trying, of course, bringing how intersectional feminism meets, like, how we can look through this lens to space. And I think we were doing it also because we ourselves are situated in different kinds of marginalizations, but privileges as well. So I think what you were already putting in was interesting, that I think it needs to be like also to, I think, change something like long term. You have to actually engage with the policies, with the system itself. So this is what we were trying to do, like bringing more people into architecture university, for example, different people that were not always giving the space. And maybe it's also something you have to do also personally. And if you like, I would say that it's also something we were doing also a bit also for ourselves to understand our situation, but also like to give also space to others. Maybe I think this is something I learned from this time working with the others in the collective, that it's like super important to sometimes give the space to another person if it's about a topic that you are actually not really this person to talk about. So maybe what you could do in this moment is actually give the space to this other person. And I see it, for example, in architecture universities. And yeah, we think like, or that there needs to be a shift, and there needs to be a shift into the curriculum and to the people that are teaching. That's what I would say. I don't know.
No, I agree with you. Actually, I was thinking that basically it's just like you have to find good partners and just go for it to change things. And I think that's what we learned. I mean, before we started this lecture series, I would have never imagined that I would be here talking to you, probably. But I guess what you said about privilege, and I think it's something that Liza Fior said in her talk, that was with your privilege, you have to put a foot in the door to allow people to just open the door themselves. But so I guess that's most of it is like to understand where you stand and what are your privilege, but what are your non-privilege, or like your, you get me? In order to open it better. And I guess each case is different. Of course, on a political level, it requires another organization as in university, but I felt that even the fact of putting ourselves together, like the 6 of us, trying to organize a lecture series actually was really a good thing, because it started to change inside the university. And the following semester, we saw that some of the teaching staff were like doing a class about female architects, and we were like, oh, that's amazing. Even if we just did this, that some teacher was thinking, oh, okay, that's true. Actually, female architects are not represented so much in the school. Let's do a class about it. We already won something, you know? So I guess it's always about I guess this network and the fact of working together is really important. And I found that everything what we've been doing until now is always about supporting each other and like building networks and know who are your allies and how do you go against something. But it's really an important question. I hope it gave you some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for this substitution. Excellent. It was so difficult technically, but somehow we managed. Thank you, and thank you to our audience who were there in freezing conditions, because it was air conditioning really to the extreme. So and they somehow managed. So thank you, and bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for listening. We can hear some
Sadly, we can't see you, but we hear you. But...
Yes. Bye.
Bye. Dziękujemy bardzo i zapraszamy za tydzień do kobiety architektki Czeszka Wera Machoninowa i Czeszka
Helena Hubertołdowa, dokładnie za tydzień 15. Tym razem miejmy nadzieję, że w środę. Znaczy tak, za tydzień i 1 dzień. Dzięki i przepraszamy za te wszystkie kłopoty, które naprawdę wynikły zupełnie niezależnie od nas. No i też za ten chłód, ale dzięki. I dziękuję bardzo za pytania też.